Paso and Juarez has always been an in-betweenness. It's a border. Even more than that, it's a portal. It's the tipping point where South and Central America becomes North America. It's a city constructed from the rocks and stone of our Franklin Mountains. It's ancient and sacred. Our region is deeply laden with rich history that can be traced back to centuries. In our Power at the Border series, we'll trace that history specifically by learning about some of the families in all facets of life, from the medical industry to the legal world to our foremost educators, cultural innovators, artistic and musical visionaries, and business leaders, entrepreneurs that have done their part in making our region the most important international border in the world. Our first study are the Shapiros. They are the quintessential American family that came from the most famous immigrant port city in the world, New York City. Don Shapiro, 95, and Bobby Shapiro, 91, continue to work at living their life to the hilt. They've pioneered alongside recently deceased ex-Juarez mayor and business visionary Jaime Bermudez Cuaron to create the pad manufacturing industry that has been the biggest industry the region has ever known. Now his children have carried that torch and have built their own world-class and formidable businesses right here on the border.
Today we have a wonderful friend by the name of Margarita Salazar, who's a professor at the University of Juarez and also a translator. And we plan on using her every way we can on translating books and documentaries from English to Spanish or the other way around.
Lo quiere destacar, pero quiere incluir, se puede decir, a políticos del Paso, Texas, unos de Juárez, figuras que han destacado y el reflejarlo. Yo creo que primeramente Juárez el Paso y dejarlo un documental. Él plantea mucho de dejar el asentado. Yo creo que el aspecto histórico, el aspecto, una narrativa, ¿verdad?, de las etapas, cómo se ha dado esta comunidad.
Claro, pues estamos a sus órdenes.
A mí me parece que esta área, esta gran mancha urbana de Ciudad Juárez y El Paso no la tiene ninguna parte del mundo. Es una frontera única, peculiar. Esta escultura, este monumento, tiene elevador y en la parte que parece ojo hay una galería. Se intentó en algún momento poner ahí un restaurante, pero obviamente la cantidad de sol y de calor acumulada por el sol no lo permite. Las temperaturas ahí creo que son más de 50 grados. Todos estos hoyos que están aquí, parques, centros recreativos, como el parque que se ve acá a la izquierda de puras lilas, o para jóvenes en patinetas y bicicletas, y unos campos de fútbol que hay hacia allá, era el antiguo cauce del río. Este es el desvío, esto fue aquel movimiento natural del agua que provocó que una tierra se quedara de aquel lado y que después se devolviera como el chamizal.
Because I was selling a lot of garments, a lot of them. And they wanted me to be part of the maquila. And we had lunch in El Paso and spoke in Juarez at La Fogata. We spoke about the plant. I was very, very interested. But at that point, I was a salesman. I didn't own a company. But later on, after I owned companies, we spoke about getting together. And I was totally involved in the maquila program which is one of the best programs ever between U.S. and North America, NATO, the North American Treaty. And nobody was bigger in setting it up than doing Army. It's so important. They're opening up twin plants, maquilas, in Juarez combined with the USA. They didn't open up, but less than a year later, I opened up Action West, a gene maker. And I called Jaime, we had lunch again, and he explained how great it was, and he made me very aware of the tremendous opportunity of getting involved in the maquila program in Mexico since I just opened my company making genes, Action West. And we worked very well together. In a matter of a few months, we opened up Action West in Mexico, started making genes, and we had laundries on both sides of the border. And according to the plan of Jaime, it worked out spectacular for us and every other manufacturer that got involved. Soy Jaime Bermúdez Cuero.
I'll tell you something else. We both loved Mexico. We both had business. I had a ranch there. He had a bunch of factories and things. I don't know I don't know what year was the peak, but at the peak, boy, you had everybody in town work for Dr. Shapiro down in South El Paso doing those stone wash jeans. I mean, hell.
But El Paso and all the border towns were big years ago because they would smuggle. They didn't have much manufacturing in Mexico. At Laredo and El Paso and Brownsville, McAllen, the Mexicans would come to the border and buy American products. And the sales were unbelievable. And in garments and lingerie and everything. But were you doing a lot of business shipping to Mexico?
Some we do more of that now than we did, but back then more was. We used to ship in the yarn. I'd buy yarns from carpet factories in Georgia. We'd buy what we call end rolls and krill out from the factory. We'd take it to Juarez, and I had about 100 weavers at one time, and we had 6 when we started, and we'd bring them the yarn, just excess carpet yarn. It'd be little short runs of it. And we could dye it on the colors, you know. You take black, you know. You didn't have all these EPA laws and everything then, so we started bringing up our own yarn and making our own designs. And then after the saddle blankets, that's all I knew at first, but then it just evolved.
Yeah.
You get in the middle, Don. You get in the
Oh
middle.
yeah, get in the middle.
You get in the middle, Don.
All right.
Or you
Right here. All right.
You know, it'd be kind of cool if we were to actually like have them playing, but if we were to be like, out there, that way it could be like, it sounds like it's more, like
Want to try that?
yeah, yeah. El Paso was such a contrast from New York City, though we soon found out that it was exciting to be a short drive away from the city named after Benito Juarez, the five-term presidente of Mexico and friend of Abraham Lincoln, who made famous the saying, El derecho ajeno es la paz, which essentially translates to respect is paramount and not to be reciprocated. And when we first moved here, the state was dry. El Paso only had a few restaurants that were private clubs. For example, one was the El Paso Club, and the other was Gillespie's Steakhouse on Montana Street. In fact, those were the first two clubs that were able to sell liquor by the drink to club members only. When the law of Texas didn't allow drinking at restaurants, these private clubs allowed their members to enjoy drinks of their choice while having dinner. There weren't many restaurants of any kind. There was only one bowling alley, the White Elephant, and there was a lot of Mexican and Chinese restaurants. So we would go to Juarez every weekend. It was fantastic. The city had super clubs, elegant night spots, and top entertainment, and the talent was unlimited. We became friendly with managers and maitre d's. We got ringside tables and met celebrities who we would later party with in Juarez. Big name shows would stop and perform in Juarez when they were traveling east from Los Angeles. We saw stars like Wayne Newton, the Kingston Trio, and Jim Nabors. Nabors, who became the most famous for playing Gomer Pyle, was discovered and managed by my brother George Shapiro. He became a close friend of the family, and places such as Martino's, the Kennedy Club, the Kentucky Club, La Fiesta, Alcazar, Charmount, and Crystal Palace, and other Juarez clubs were as classy as those in New York, believe it or not.
I'm Randy Shapiro. I am the middle child of my parents, Don and Bobby Shapiro. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and born and raised in El Paso. I was fortunate enough to have my parents move from New York City a few years before I was born, and El Paso's been very good to us, and we love being in El Paso. Back in the mid-50s, my father was traveling along the U.S.-Mexico border with the business that he was involved with at the time, and he picked El Paso as the place where he wanted to settle in and raise a family in. And we've been blessed ever since, really, to be in El Paso. When I was in college in the late 70s, my father had started a apparel company, Action West. And when I graduated from college at San Diego State, I was offered a position with Action West. At that time, I was in my early 20s, and I accepted that position, moved back to El Paso, and I've been living in El Paso ever since then. Being involved in Action West and having my father as a mentor for all those years is really one of the greatest things that has happened to me, true blessing, not only enjoying the time, all the time that we're able to spend together, but also learning from an excellent businessman and strengthening the relationship that we always had together. In addition to that, being involved in the apparel business during that time was very, very exciting for us. When I started with the company, we were only manufacturing in the U.S., and as we grew and as the opportunity to utilize Mexico as a production source was opened up, then we were able to take advantage of utilizing Mexico as a manufacturing base for us as well. That was interesting in many ways, not only in Juarez, but we also had operations in Chihuahua, in Ojinaga, and Torreon area, and spent quite a bit of time in Mexico City and Puebla as well. So, for us, being so close to Mexico has been such a wonderful benefit in so many ways, not only culturally, but also from a business perspective. Late 70s and the early 80s there was a gene boom really all across the world. And El Paso was at the forefront of a lot of that activity, partly because we were so close to Mexico and we were able to manufacture some of our products down there. But at the time, there were multiple companies that were involved in the apparel manufacturing in El Paso and in Mexico. We also had quite a few laundries, since most of these jeans were being washed at the time. So there were many laundries that were set up, and El Paso was a very, very important hub for the apparel industry, particularly in the jean business. And there were many companies that were involved in the apparel manufacturing in El Paso at that time, and it was a great group of companies. We knew most of the company owners, were friends with most of the company owners, and to a great degree, we all worked together as a group versus as competitors for the most part. And it was at the time, it was a very good thing for the region and for El Paso as well. So about 20 years ago, I started a company called Happy Tails. We are in the pet products business, currently doing dog toys, dog beds, cat beds, some grooming products for dogs as well. Definitely my experience of not only working with my father as a mentor, but being involved in the apparel business translates very well to what we're currently doing with Happy Tails. And most of our production, we're not producing in Mexico, unfortunately, but most of our production on the products comes from overseas. And we do some manufacturing here in El Paso, have great employees here with us, helping us out. And we're able to sell our products globally, mostly in North America, in the US and the Canadian markets. And we enjoy the business. It's an enjoyable business being involved with the pets, and very similar to the apparel business in terms of the customer base. So many of the customers that I previously worked with Action West are some of our current customers with Happy Tails. We're so fortunate to have a great environment for people to live in, and I think that translates in the quality and the commitment of the employees that we have and the friends that we have, not only that are working directly for me, but the people that we're involved with from a business perspective. The people in El Paso really, I think, really look out for each other and try to help each other out. And I couldn't think of a better place to be in business over El Paso.
Yeah, my name's Steve Shapiro. I'm a real estate broker in El Paso. I have a company named Shapiro Realty. I named it after my father, Don Shapiro. Well, it started out as a small company. When I was 16, I used to work in the cutting room. He had a factory down near Paso and First Street, so that was one of my summer jobs. So basically, I was a normal factory worker when he had the cutting room down there. And then I went off to college, so I went to UT Austin, San Diego State, came back with an accounting degree. So I worked as a CPA, and then after a while, I went to work for my dad in the accounting department. So I was doing accounting, inventory control, and I wanted to learn new things about the industry, so I went into the sales department. So I had a small territory. It was Arizona, New Mexico, the El Paso region. So I started there, and then as I was helping my dad, that the company was growing. So we started out, I think when I was with my father, it was an $8 million company. And then we grew it to close to a $40 million company. So as the company was growing, I did more traveling. I was going to the showrooms in Los Angeles and Dallas and New York. And eventually I ended up in Los Angeles. And when I was in Los Angeles, we were more aware of what the trends were, the national trends. So we started diversifying the product lines. We went into little girls' jeans. We went into large size jeans. So we were expanding the market. So when we did that, the company grew. It was a fun industry. There was a lot of small to medium-sized chains, that we could sell for. And so we had a staff of designers, pattern makers. We had production in El Paso, Mexico. And then, when the company was growing, I was in Los Angeles and traveling to New York. Eventually, the company got to the size where my dad wanted me back in El Paso because he really couldn't handle everything himself. So I came to work for him. I came back to El Paso. When the company reached a certain level, then it continued to grow. Well, my father, he saw the potential of having Mexico as a manufacturing base, so he actually would call the states, U.S. senators. I think Bob Dole was very instrumental in kicking off the NAFTA program. So my dad, he has a philosophy that, he does not live in fear, he's a winner. And so he just went to the top. So he was able to get conversations going with Bob Dole to help pass the NAFTA program. And so when NAFTA started, my dad had one of the first, factories in Juarez. We had a sewing factory over there. And then, for the retailers that we sold to, it was an advantage having the Mexico production, because we were doing fashion in Mexico, but Mexico was so close to El Paso, it was fairly easy to control the quality and the service, having the factories in Mexico. And, there's a lot of Spanish people speaking in El Paso, so there wasn't really a communication barrier, between the company in El Paso and the factories in Mexico. So that enabled the company to grow, because we could mass produce fashion and at a location that was close to the U.S. Market. So that was extremely beneficial, for the clothing market and for the company that we had, which was named Action West. I mean, my dad was, very, very wise, and so his philosophy was, as the company was growing, he would buy a building to do the manufacturing. And so he was doing it as an outside investment. So as the company grew from an $8 million company to a $40 million company, we needed a lot of facilities, larger facilities. So he was able to secure the real estate. And fortunately for him, when the industry left El Paso, he still had the real estate. So that's actually how I got involved in real estate. Is I was helping my dad, rent the big warehouses, that he had. Like, he had other people helping him at the time, but when I started helping him, we went from having 10% of the properties rented to 100% rented. So, since we've had them at 100%, we've maintained, the rental at 100% level. But we were able to take the creativity and the business sense that we got from the clothing industry and bring it into the real estate industry. So we had buildings that were not that easy to rent, but we came up with a very creative approach on how to rent out a big warehouse space, where they were properties not easy to rent just because of the age of the buildings and the efficiency, but through creative approaches, we're able to find out a way to rent out the real estate. And I was working with Maquilas and Juarez in their sales department, and I decided I wanted to be my own boss. So I figured I was already helping my dad with the real estate on the warehouses, so I just thought that would be a great industry for me to go into. That was back in 2010. And since then, the real estate market in El Paso has been incredible. It keeps growing every year, and it's a fun business to be in.
Here we are at Joe, Vinny, and Bronson's with owner Cristina Munoz. Hi, Cristina.
Hi.
Thank you for doing this.
Yes.
We appreciate this.
Really excited about this.
Yeah. So are we. So just a little backstory on my connection to Joe, Vinny, and Bronson's. I was invited through a friend when they had like a pre-opening for like friends and family.
Yeah, a soft opening, right?
A soft opening. I don't know how I ended up here, but I did.
I know, yeah.
And how long ago was that?
That was 11 years ago.
11
yeah,
years ago.
in July.
Wow.
Yes, yeah. So in July we hit the 11-year mark.
It does not feel like
No,
11 years.
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah, a lot happens in 11 years, and I can't believe it's been that much time.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
how funny, I still get to, hear people that happened upon us that night, right? And that we've known to this day. It's really exciting to hear that you were part of that group that came in.
And what I respect about what you did and what Joe, Vinny, and Bronson's did, I really see you guys as trailblazers and pioneers of this Piedras area here. And talk about that. Like what spawned the idea to start up your cafe?
Yeah, it's fun to talk about that especially when you say a warped sense of time, right? Because you look back at everything and it's changed dramatically, I feel. And so we wanted to start something in the area. One, this is our neighborhood. It's such an eclectic group of people in this area, which is what makes it so special. So I wanted to bring something different, something unexpected, I feel, for this area as well, and something that kind of matched my lifestyle as well. I'm a mom of 3 at the time. My kids were little, was busy, was working. There's a lot going on at that time. But you still want to have a life a little bit, right? You still want to do something and be involved in the community and culture, right? So music, art, all that kind of stuff. So that was what inspired that. It's like I want to start something that encompasses all of that, but it's a comfortable, relaxed atmosphere too for any kind of a person to come in and be a part of that and immerse in it for that moment, and not have to be following some kind of scene if your lifestyle doesn't really go for that, right?
Absolutely.
So that's what inspired that. I grew up with my family owning businesses. It really inspired a very strong work ethic. It's a different type of work ethic when you have that stake in the game, that it's yours. So I knew eventually that I was going to want to open up something too, and I think the area is what called for what I wanted to do.